Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast. As always, the Muddy Waters, if I can get it out right, podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state so we can be more informed. Unfortunately, the mainstream media fails miserably to inform people about what's actually happening within our state. Seems to want us distracted by what Trump is doing or what the Democrats are doing nationally, but not really a lot of emphasis on what's really going on in our state and actually working as a propaganda arm of the left here to help hide some of the things that are actually happening. Fortunately, we have the Maine Wire and a couple other people who are trying to share what's really going on. But that's why we exist, and we do that by bringing people on. Like today, we have with us Gubernatorial candidate Owen McCarthy to talk a little bit about what he's hoping to do. Thank you for joining us, Owen.
Well, thanks, Chuck, and thanks for filling this void in the media in Maine. And I think the long form ability to talk about the real issues and problems and solutions and solve them all right here is a really great opportunity. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. No, I don't know that I ever thought that I was going to do this. I think at one point a couple of years ago, I had this idea that I would have a podcast because I had some friends who were like, I would do these like mini TED Talks, we'll call it, at work, and people would be like, "You should start a podcast." And I was like, I could talk. And so I had an idea at one point that I would do a podcast, but it definitely was more focused on me talking. I didn't think it would be this interview type of thing, but the Joe Rogan style podcast seems to be, as you said, the long form, one of the best opportunities is really get into and talk about issues and, give people the opportunity to know. I mean, part of it's about sharing what's going on. So I interview parents, I interview like legislators and other different people who can speak to the specifics of some of the things that are happening, business owners in our state and how those things are impacting people. But also, part of the vision behind this was to give candidates an opportunity, give the people really an opportunity to get to know potential candidates. So I'm just really thankful to be able to have this space where people can learn a little bit more about who people like you are, making the decision to run for governor here in our great state. During this really turbulent, crazy time in a state that Trump lost by 6.5% against one of the worst, probably the worst presidential candidate in U.S. history. And he still lost by 6.5%. Yeah.
Well, Chuck, for someone that didn't want to do a podcast, being on episode 79 of it is a good testament to that. And two, I do appreciate this format because, I find in many formats, you only get sound bites, but you don't get to the meat of, like if we want to talk about what I've been calling legalizing housing, which we should in the future, like there's a lot of layers to like how we actually do that. Right. And I think there's excitement to do that. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and maybe a little about me to start. Right. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an engineer, and I'm an outsider of the political world. And I think that confluence of things is really interesting as we think about the 2026 governor race, because I think I can bring in a new approach, a new set of ideas, like take a problem and solutions mindset while taking a real practical approach, and bring new people into the fold. And I think that's helpful. I grew up in the woods. So Chuck, you ever been to Patton, Maine before?
What's it near?
Okay. Mount Katahdin. How about Mount Katahdin?
I've been near Mount Katahdin. I think probably the closest I came to Patton, unless I drove through it, is when I went to Fort Kent a number of times. My dad lives up in Fort Kent, and so I drive up there and I see Katahdin in the distance.
Okay, so and likely though, next time you should go the other route. Likely you go up to Smyrna, get off, and then go across and up Route 11. Well, next time you go up, get off in Sherman and drive through Patton. That's my hometown. You can see the best view of Mount Katahdin. And
I'll have to do that.
And it's historically been a logging town, and it's a town full of great people. And that's where I grew up. My dad was a logger. My mom worked in the school as a lunch lady, and you learn a lot about rural Maine growing up there, and it was a great place to grow up. And today, as I look across the state, I don't think in many parts of the state, most of them, there's the same opportunity that a kid like myself who, had a great public school education, who went into engineering school, who had good family and community values, and is able to then go off and build businesses. I don't think it's the same for the next generation, and that's a motivator for me. I also don't think that group of people, the working class, folks from there see Maine as affordable after what's happened over the last 6 or 7 years, and it's happy to unpack all that. So those are some of the reasons why I'm jumping in, but also why I'm excited about bringing a new face to this race.
Yeah. No, what's funny is I remember the first time I saw your name that I knew that it was in terms of the gubernatorial race. And I remember the Maine Wire put out an article about the race for the Blaine House. And I really wish they'd titled it differently, or their website had a different search function. Cause I have to remember, in order to be able to find that article, don't search for gubernatorial race 2026 because you won't find it. Blaine House is how to find it on their website. But anyway, so I've gone back and referenced it a number of times, but I remember seeing your name in there and I was like, I wonder who this guy is. And then when we were at they had the chairman's dinner,
the DeMillo's event,
at DeMillo's, I look over before you got over and spoke, and I didn't notice you so much as I noticed your wife, because
that happens a lot, Chuck, actually. So,
well, not in that way. But I noticed her and I was like, I know who that is. And so as we found out later, one of my really good friends from college, his sister is your wife, and I thought that was an interesting connection. But yeah, and that was the first time I heard you speak, and I'm just wondering, who is this guy? What's his thing? He's got this challenge of I think running for governor is a challenge in and of itself, but one of the bigger challenges that I think you face, being a political outsider, I think is definitely a positive, but it also means you're lesser known. And so anyway, I thought that was just a fun little interesting
thing. It's a good point. There's a few components you need to win a race, right? You need to be likable, you need to be credible, and you need to be known, right? And likable is up to you all to determine, right, as you get to know me. And credible, I think, is both on policy chops and background, and known is on both working hard and unfortunately, you got to raise the money, which I'm working hard on, to spread the message. And because I think you're right? Those are the three things that have to come together to be able to win a race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So yeah, there's a lot of people in the race. And so okay, so you kind of bring those things to the table, but what's the primary motivator? What's the why? And I think there's the question of why. So the one is the why. What I think these are really the same question, which is in the midst of this purple state, that again, Trump lost. How could if I'm going to run a race, I got to believe that I can win. And I think the question is, how could you believe that you can win in the midst of our current political environment? And then also what could be so motivating for you to take on? I mean, you live here in Southern Maine, right? I live in
Gorham now. Yeah, I live in Gorham now.
Conservatism is not popular here. Right. And so you take on a lot of there's going to be a lot of stuff thrown at you by the other side, let alone, the people you're running out against on our own side. And hopefully we're polite and not too destructive to our own right side in order to win a gubernatorial candidacy and then lose the general. But what could motivate somebody to want to do that in this current environment, I guess?
Well, a few things. One is, I started here, but I always picture both the people I grew up with and the next generation coming through, and I think about what is it like to look into the future and imagine having less opportunity than maybe the past generations had, and I to me that motivates me to figure it out, because I think there's some clear direction on how we can solve some of those problems. And then two is, how do we make sure that we don't solve just for just for Southern Maine, right? We solve for the rest of the state, because there's a lot of good in those communities. And so that's a why. Why me?
And that's enough to take that huge risk.
So I was finding, Chuck, it's a good quick. I was finding, because I was on the board of trustees for the humane system, right? And which I think higher ed's got a lot of negatives, but there's a lot of positives there if done right, in terms of educating engineers and nurses and others, and really changing the direction for first generation college students. And I found myself there thinking that we have the talent, but where are they going to work? And can they afford to buy a house? And what are they going to do? And that was the system my head was working, not the humane system my head was working in. And it was, I was spending all my time on that and not as much on my company, right? Like it was a volunteer efforts. And so it really, that this large problem of opportunity and affordability and state spending, like kind of hit me through that. And I was staying up all night almost sometimes trying to solve this. And so, it is enough to drag me in the why, but I'm also a person that, and this is my father's doing, I think, that when I see a problem and I start complaining about something, I get more motivated to go help solve it than just be a bystander on it, particularly if I think I can do it. And that gene is a problem right now. Holly says, my wife, who you mentioned, that Owen, it's like you're running at a hurricane right now. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, Holly, maybe I'll get in the eye, maybe I'll get hit, but it's a worthy endeavor to do it anyways. So.
Yeah, well, I definitely, I didn't mean to stress that too much, but I definitely think that it's like, it is one of those things. We're getting involved at all in politics in 2025 in the midst of like the most divided nation that we've been in possibly since the Civil War. We're not actually yet killing each other for the most part, although some of that might have happened.
Tragedy this weekend, Chuck, right? I mean, it's sad to see, and it's definitely, it gets taken to the max in some places, and it's terrible.
Yeah, but and so like it is, you have to be kind of fearless, and it sounds like you are, or at least to some degree fearless, to kind of take on this type of thing, this huge challenge that it is. So I'm grateful to anybody who's willing to stick their nose out there and do that for essentially for the greater good, for the good of a lot of other people. Obviously, it'll be good for you and your kids, but also for all of Maine if we're able to like turn things around here. Because, as you've mentioned, you mentioned the business, right? You've mentioned housing. These are like two areas where it's just so much more challenging. I grew up here too. And the 90s,
Madison or St. Albans, Chuck? Yeah,
Madison High School. Yeah, I went to Madison. I lived in a little town called Athens. That's right. I probably didn't know it, but played against in basketball against Holly's brother Kevin in high school, and just didn't necessarily know it because he was off at Dirigo, right? And I was at Madison.
The Bulldogs and the Cougars definitely matched up, Chuck.
Yeah, sure. Quite a bit. We actually played them in the playoffs once. I remember. Anyway, but yeah, so things like the 90s were great in Maine in a lot of ways, and it really seems like that ability to afford to live has gone away. For a variety of reasons. And so we definitely need substantial change in order for there to be hope for future generations to be able to like afford to live here. And so given all that, so that's your kind of motivation. That's why you're here. I want to know a little bit about because I've heard you mention your business and I don't even know what it is. So what is your business? What do you do? How did you start it? All that kind of stuff. And I think, did you start that in Maine?
No, actually, I did not. But this is what happened. So my best friend from undergrad is this guy by the name of Brian Harris, and Brian Harris he's originally from West Enfield, Maine, actually, and he went off to get trained in this really niche field that no one's ever heard of called neurologic music therapy. And he was at Spalding Rehab in Boston, which is the Harvard Medical School rehab affiliate, and he was treating people sort of live and hands-on with how you can use rhythm and music to help them recover things like their walking in the hospital, like a manual therapist. And people were leaving the hospital saying, well, Brian, how do you get this care when you leave the hospital? And at the time, there was only 2,000 people trained like Brian in the world. And if you were in Patton, Maine or West Enfield or Madison, like you're not getting access to that kind of care, even though it was world-class care. And so Brian, to his credit, kept coming to me, who has, a business background and a sales and engineering background, and said, Owen, here's videos of people getting better, faster, more effectively. How do we reach more people? And so Med Rhythms was born to answer that question. And so we launched out of Spalding. Within 6 months, we said, we're packing up. We're in Boston at the time. We're packing up and we're moving back to Maine because we want to be in Maine. We want to create jobs in Maine. And we believed, and it's true, that you can do it from there and here. And so we moved back to Maine. Also, Holly wanted to be back and I wanted to be back. There was a lot of dynamics there, but we moved back to Maine.
Yeah.
And fast forward to today, Chuck, The answer to that question is we took Brian's brain and we built a software algorithm that replicates it, and we put it into a medical device. So we have a product that we can take that help people, like, think of like music therapy meets physical therapy meets medical device in the home that has 2 sensors, handheld device, headphones, and you ship it out to people. And we've taken that through. We've raised 60 million in venture capital. We've taken it through 6 clinical trials that have all been successful, including having to navigate clinical trials in COVID, which was a wild experience. We've gotten through the FDA with a product for help people that have stroke walking deficits, and a product that helps people in Parkinson's disease. And we just got a Medicare code last year, which so we'll pay and reimburse for the product at a good rate, and will help a lot of people. And so the company now is at a really good spot where we've solved what I call all the unknown challenges, and we're bringing in the team who's done it before to scale it up, and which enables me to go commit full time to the campaign and the race and serving Maine. And so that's a little bit about the company, and it's been a great pleasure to build it from here in Maine.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, sounds like you're already working at strategically figuring out how to use technology to solve today's problems, right? Which is part of what we probably need to do here in the state of Maine. So nice. That's that.
Yeah, for sure.
Really
I mean, there's coming from a technology background, but also like, engineering in rural Maine, I think is an interesting blend to say, particularly if you aim it at, well, how do we deliver government services better, but at lower costs? I think, there's a lot of there and a lot of things to do if you take that lens to things, Chuck, and would plan to do that.
Nice. So as you're planning to run, we kind of mentioned a couple of things, but I want to give you some more time to talk about it. I think you specifically said some things about making housing legal again, or legalize housing.
We need to legalize housing, Chuck, because it's so hard to build.
Yeah. So tell me more. Tell me more about that, and what are some of it, as we drift into some of the other issues that I think are at the top of your list on what you want to tackle, and why you're the guy.
Okay, well, so I bucket them in my head under 3 categories, right? They come out in a bunch of, but it's really affordability for Mainers, opportunity for Mainers, e.g. jobs and state spending, right? So the housing one is under affordability, right? And I actually think as a state government, the things where we can have the biggest impact on affordability are housing, energy, and taxes, right? So those are the 3 places. On housing, I have been out talking to Mainers for the last couple of months, right, as I explored and then announced. And I have so many stories about people that have wanted to build or wanted to try to build, and the permits have gotten canceled, or they were required to put in sprinkler systems that made it there was a hunting lodge in northern Maine that is a lodge, so it's under hospitality, that wanted to add a few more small lodges on this lake, near this lake. And to do it, because of the rules, you needed to have a sprinkler system. Well, it's not on town water, so they needed to drill a well, and they needed to pump the stuff, and they needed to install it, they needed to set it up, and it was going to 2.5x the cost of the project by just adding the sprinkler system, because these were small cabins. So when I say legalize housing, and this is what I'm talking about. And so I think there's 4. You got to bucket out the solution into 4 areas, right? One is there's things the state can do. 2 is there's things that locally you have to do, and we're a big local control state, and I support that. 3 is workforce, and 4 is innovative solutions, right? So at the level of the things the state can do, currently, if you subdivide a plot by more than 3, DEP and DOT gets in the conversation, and from the state level, and when you bring DEP in, oftentimes there's an unknown amount of time where it would take to get a permit, which is really hard to pencil a project. So one thing to do is take that number 3 and increase it. Can it be 6? Can it be 9? Can it be 12? Right? And so make projects that are less than that size, make projects that have are smoother, like they're bigger, but not giant ones, right? So I think that's one. Yeah, go ahead. You want to jump in?
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like a little wild and crazy that like if you're going to subdivide your property to more than 3 spots that you need DEP to come in. That just like the
DEP and DOT, right? Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like that just seems like a crazy over regulation. Obviously, this is not my field. It's not. I mean, I know I have real estate, but like that just seems like a wild, like really like micromanagey version. And yeah, so that's obvious to me. Like, yeah, if we could expand that, so it, yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and then on the local level, we're never going to get to the point where, or we shouldn't actually, where the state government is being very heavy-handed with a lot of our municipalities, because Mainers, like, we're fiercely independent and we like our local control. I mean, there's certain places where maybe yes, but in this case, it's not going to work. But what we can do is come up with ways to reward people that overperform, like towns and municipalities that want to build more units than their allotment of the deficit. Can we reward them in some way? Right now we give out money for capital A affordable housing, which I'm not saying fully get rid of, because there's right. If you build 300, if you put 300 million into that and there's 300,000 a pop, that's 1,000 units. That's not a lot of units, right? To build, right? Like we need to build more. Hopefully my math is right. Like I see all these memes about politician math or whatever that come up, and hopefully I don't show up in one of those. But to me, can you reward the places that want to do it and take a carrot approach for this? Because right now I've done the math. We're in a deficit of about 42,000 homes today. And that assumes we don't want to grow the population at all, which is the oldest state in the country. I know people don't want change. We do need some people to move in to replace some talent to do some things. And so, that's number 2 is like we can reward municipalities from the state level. 3 is on talent, Chuck. I got to unpack this one a little more. People have been talking about going into the trades, and I think it's a popular talking point. And like, I think we should do it. And we need more electricians. We need more plumbers. We need more carpenters. And I think we need to make sure that they have the centers to train, and the math actually works there, because I think that's a bottleneck. If you get outside of Cumberland and York County and some of the outer counties, they don't have a red tape issue as much. They have more of a, hey, like I actually went to them. Gave this line, Chuck. I said, we need to legalize housing. I was in Caribou. And they were like, oh, and I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's hard to get permits. So like, actually, I could get a permit tomorrow. Like, no problem. What I can't get is I don't have a plumber. Or if I do, they're 3 times the cost they used to be. And when I pay my plumber 3 times more, my electrician says, well, Frank over here is getting paid 3 times more. I'm going to get paid 3 times. And then the carpenter says, well, okay, I need to get, so it just inflates it without the workforce. So I think workforce is a major issue there. And then finally, I'm really interested in new approaches to building, right? I visited one of these custom home modular manufacturers that we have in Maine and South Paris. And they have this is a bit of a tangent, but they have this really cool saw that if you feed it in house plans, it will saw all the wood to the plans. It will mark where you need to nail it together, and it'll drill the holes for electrical and plumbing, and they assemble it in the factory, and they can churn out 10 homes a week, right? And so wow. If there's a workforce issue, there might be an innovative solution like that, or like the work at UMaine or others that we can use our own stuff to build some of our houses.
Is that like 3D printing? Because I hear this term and I have no idea what it means, but people talk about how in China they 3D print homes. Is that kind of like
okay? That's not that. No. So 2 things. And actually, as an aside, I was a founding member of a 3D printing company back in the day. So I do have some experience there also. I just haven't talked about it that much. But what I just talked about is more advanced manufacturing. It basically takes all the lumber you normally would think and just cuts the stuff and marks it basically creates an IKEA kit for the factory to assemble it to make it easier. 3D printing is more of an additive manufacturing approach. At the University of Maine, they've got, think about this like robotic arm that has material in it that it can deposit wherever it wants, right? And it builds it block by block from the ground up, right? And in this case, at the University of Maine, they're doing a wood composite material that they melt down, and as soon as it hits the ground, it hardens up, and you can build different shells in different shapes, and you can build rooms kind of from the bottom up, and it knows the plans. In other cases, they're using think about like a cement mixer, or no, like a cement mixer plus like one of those cranes from a truck that fixes the light poles, and that basically has coordinates it's given to be able to print and make the material right there. So I'm probably we're going too much, Chuck, into my engineering land and less so into my public policy land. But I could talk about this stuff all day. Like I love that stuff, but I have to tempt myself to get out of it in these conversations. Yeah. So.
Nice. But so what you're getting at, though, when you're talking about the group from South Paris and the modular homes, is basically this process is much more cost effective, and it's innovative partly because it helps reduce the need for manual laborers, which we're struggling to be able to produce here in the state. And obviously we've got to solve these solutions. Like, do you have any theories or thoughts on like what's causing there to be a shortage of manual labor for people in the trades? And also like what obviously like some of these innovative solutions are great, but what are some other solutions to address that as well?
On the manual labor side, well, first of all, I think some of it is a symptom of the fact that we're the oldest state in the country, right? So being meeting age 44, you name a profession right now, I bet there's a shortage, and people, right? Like whether it be electrician, plumber, carpenter, or whether it be nurses, engineers, lawyers outside of Cumberland County. There's plenty of lawyers in Portland, but lawyers in the rest of the counties, right? Like and I think some of that is that. And to me, the long to medium term solution is we've been in sort of this economic death spiral because of both state policies over the 6 or 7 years, but because we haven't invested in creating jobs and opportunities. And the medium to long term way to turn it around is to make this a place where we are building, reindustrializing America, and we are building manufacturing, and we are doing things, because you start to see talent moving in and people going there, et cetera. And I think that's a medium to long term solution. Two is, as a society, I think it's changed the last couple of years for a positive, but we've overemphasized the pathways to take. Like, if you don't know what to do, you should go to a 4-year college, which I'm all in on higher ed in certain cases, but not in on that's the only option, because I think there's a lot of options. And I think that since that's being broken down, people are more likely to say, you know what, I want to go be a plumber. I remember one of my high school classmates once said, this was profound, and I won't name the name, but I was asking him when I was graduating high school, I'm like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to school? Like, what are you going to do? He's like, oh, and I'm not going to get paid to party I'm not going to pay to party for 2 years. Like, I'm going to go out. I know myself. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to get a job as a plumber, and I'm going to be just fine. And he said it almost like he's ashamed to say it initially, but so I'm hopeful we get to the point where someone can just say, I'm going to be a plumber, and I hopefully people cheer, because it's like, this is a noble profession that there's a lot of people that need to go into it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we obviously, I think that's part of my thought is I think we've stigmatized things and basically, I don't know, Americans are soft, and and that's part of I think you don't have enough people going into these types of jobs because they want the easy, what seemed to be the easy, cushy, desk job at some company. They don't want to get their hands dirty. And I say they, I'm not one of them. I don't want to get my hands dirty. I've been starting the process of renovating my parents' old house. Well, not even renovating at this point, cleaning up outside is the short version. But anyway, getting ready to do some renovation. And I'm like, I don't love doing these things. things. So I'm one of these people who I've had a desk job for most of my career. I did work on a farm. It was my first job. I worked in a restaurant. I've done some painting. I've done some of that stuff. It's not really what I want to do, but I think too many people in our culture, not only is it stigmatized and looked down upon, but we just like things have been too easy for a lot of people that grow up in our world, that we don't want to have to do that difficult job. And I think that there's a combination of a parenting and a education element, but yeah, we definitely are, as you said, we're overemphasizing secondary education, when so many people, like if my generation went and got a degree that they are definitely not doing a job in. I worked in banking for 15 years, and I had coworkers who had no college degree who advanced higher in the company that I did without acquiring a college degree, and just by working hard and learning on the job. And there's this myth that you need this college education in order to be able to get ahead in life, and it's proven over and over again to not be true, and led to this shortage in the trades as well.
Well, and to pick up on that thread a little bit, many colleges and universities have not done anyone any favors by continuing to raise the prices and having people take out large student loans that they know they're never going to be able to pay off in their lifetime. And that's a challenge. I think, that was something at the University of Maine system. We always said, like, it's less debt than a used truck was what we used to say, like graduating, which for many, if you're an engineer and that's the case, and you're starting at 80,000 or whatever, right? That's a good deal, a good ROI over a lifetime, and it's a good ROI. But there's other places that aren't a good ROI, and it's not just noble to go into the trades, as I'm saying. It's also like logical to do it, right? It makes sense.
There's good money there, and especially if you could build a business, there's good money that you can make in the trades. Much better sometimes, like being a business owner. And I think one of the problems that we have, this is something that you won't be able to tackle at a local level, but one of the problems is, as a society, from my career in banking, we like the world of credit, the world of personal lending, small, and how we treat small business owners makes it de-incentivizes business ownership. So for instance, you're at a W-2 job, right? And you're working there for a couple of years. You can go and you can get a mortgage based on your total gross income, even though you spend on
right.
But if you own a small business, like as soon as you go from being a W-2 employee to owning a small business, you're not going to be able to get approved for a loan for 2 years.
No, I love it. Actually resonates a lot, Chuck, because when we moved back to Maine, I just started the company, was an owner in the company. Well, I think the first year I didn't take a salary whatsoever, actually, like worked for $0, built some sweat equity up in the thing. Holly and I wanted to go buy a house, and we've landed in Gorham. And the lender was like, oh, and you can't put your name on this loan because it's actually going to make it worse than if Holly was the sole person to borrow the money. And so Holly bought me a house while I was building a company, which was great. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing is, there's this weird idea in our society, I think, that like, again, I work for a company, I could get let go at any time, right? Like that company could close, they could sell, they could close the branch, whatever, I could get let go at any time. But like my income there, if it's a W-2, it's basically like, from a lending perspective, you just assume that business is going to continue to be in operation to infinity and beyond. But if you're a small business owner, oh my gosh, do you get scrutinized? Like, now you may live at a much higher level than I do, but on paper you make less money. Not necessarily you, but like some of these small business.
I was going to say, Chuck,
right?
I'm a pretty simple guy, okay, with my living. So, I try to keep it basic and not live at a high level. So,
well, I just mean, like, there are a lot of things that if you're a business owner, you can write off that if you're a W-2 employer, you still have to pay for, but you don't get to deduct from your taxes. So you could be living at the same level. You could take one person who's a business owner and one person who's a W-2 employee. The person who's a business owner is writing off all these things that they're legally allowed to write off, but that the W-2 employee also has to pay for. But when both of these people who are living at the same level go to get a loan, the person who's a W-2 employee, I'm getting into the weeds of finance now. Sorry, everybody.
No, listen. Your finance is like my engineering, and the listener is going to be like, I thought we were talking about the governor's race here.
We'll get there, but the point is, like, there are a lot of factors that are disincentivizing people from going into owning a business, which really is one of the things that we should be encouraging people to do, and we've got to figure out how to fix that other issue. But that's more of a national credit finance issue than it is a gubernatorial issue.
Well, let me try to connect it back, Chuck. I just printed out this sheet of paper someone sent to me, okay? And it's the ranking of Maine versus other states. And there's a business climate perspective. I've got 4 stats. The business environment, according to U.S. News and World Reports, puts us at 8th worst in the country. The business friendliness from CNBC puts us as 14th worst. CNBC puts us on the American states, top businesses for states, at 9th worst for businesses. And we're 6th worst for best states to start a business, according to Forbes. And so, not only do you get hit with the federal situation, like we've set up Maine as a place where you actually need to work extra hard to build a business and then sustain it and grow it from here than anywhere else in the country, essentially.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that gets back to what you were saying, and I'll let you continue along. But in workforce, I think one of the biggest challenges here is workforce, like having enough people to do the job, having the people that are skilled and able and willing to, especially in the trades. And you were talking about innovative solutions like South Paris.
So that's right. Right. So there's ways to jumpstart that, but that point. That's always the chicken and the egg, right? Like, if you think about moving businesses in or businesses starting up, it's like, does someone come to Maine and then like bring people, or do they need to find talent? And oftentimes, like, you start with talent and then you can build around that, right? And because we're a small state that's aging, that doesn't have a great history for business climate, I think we need to focus on, if we think about economic development opportunities, there's the ground conditions, right? We talk about energy, we talk about healthcare, all these things. But from a competitive strategy standpoint, we need to focus on things we can be good at and win and make a case where we have talent and we have expertise. We were talking about this before. We need to advanced forest products or lumber or other things. Like, we have raw material, we have talent, we have a history here, we have a narrative. We need to get energy under control. We need a full on, like, top to bottom strategy to create a bunch of jobs there, because to me, it's something where we have a right to win and we should win there. Right. And another one I've been thinking a lot about is naval innovation. And I say that because if you talk to the Trump administration and the federal government, they say the number one national security concern for the United States right now is commercial boat building capacity. And they say that because China has 50% of the world's boats. We have 3% ability to build boats. We have 3% of the ability to build boats. If we ever got into conflict in the South China Sea, that's a tough equation to fight. And so there's a bunch of investment that's going to come in at things like small vessels, commercial shipbuilding, demand, drones, think autonomous systems, think these sort of things. There's a reason Maine should win there and could create a bunch of jobs that bring dollars in. And so that's another place where we need a top to bottom strategy. And the third one I've been thinking a lot about is we've gone from 5,000 to 10,000 jobs in life science, broadly described, in largely the southern part of the state, but up to Jackson Labs, et cetera. I think, that's a place where we can win and have something to build on into the future. And so to me, there's business climate, which we need to change. We need to get permitting better. We need to cut the red tape. We need to make sure the energy is cheaper. There's strategy. We need to pick where we can focus, where we have talent, right? And then there's marketing and business development, where we need to get the right people into the government and talking about Maine to attract companies in. And that combination of things is how we start to medium to long term turn it around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So aside from housing and I guess workforce development related to that, did you like? I feel like did we talk energy already, or what was your? I got lost.
And we did not talk. Okay,
so,
sorry. Yeah.
No, I got lost myself.
Yeah.
Like,
so energy,
caught up in that.
So affordability, right? Like affordability, opportunity, state spending are the three things.
Yeah.
Housing, we started there. We're going to be here a long time, Chuck. Energy, energy. A few stats for folks, and then what we can do, right? So we have had the fastest growth rate in the cost of energy in the country the last 5 years.
Well, we want to be fastest at something, but not at the growth of the cost of energy. What in the world?
Yeah, exactly. According to this chart I printed out, we're fourth highest for average residential electricity prices in the country. So that's also another one we don't want to be on. The other thing that's interesting is we have from December to February. There is a time where because of all the solar we've built, which is intermittent, and it doesn't really work that well at that period of time, right? Like, and because people start using natural gas to heat their homes in addition for the electrical grid, we have to bring in liquefied natural gas to the states to power our energy plants, and at 10x the price of actual natural gas. I mean, at the same carbon cost, right? Like, not that I'm counting that, but like at the same carbon cost, and that gets spread out across the ratepayers, right? So the solar program, people talk a lot about the subsidies, but they don't talk about the fact that we've had to plug the holes of the intermittent energy in the winter with liquefied natural gas. And so these are two things that are really driving the grid.
And not as you said, not just liquefied natural gas, but you're talking at like 10x the cost, the normal cost.
Yeah. In my head, I see a 10x right beside LNG and say, for 3 months, right? For 3 months at 10x the cost. So that's like 2.5 times the cost of energy total across the state, right? Like, because it gets blended out, right? So, so it's a wild thing. Yeah. So that needs to be solved, right? Like, we need to make sure, because we're never going to give relief to hardworking Mainers, and we're never going to attract manufacturers at scale to come back unless we solve this. There's really 3 ways to do it, and not that they're easy to do, right? Like, Chuck, none of these things are easy to do, right? But one is we need to either pull in more natural gas from New York or Nova Scotia, right? And each of them has political issues. I'm optimistic with the Trump administration that we'd have a partner to help us permit and bring things through. You still have to deal with New York and other states to get them here, right? But that's one. Yep. There's some natural gas in Nova Scotia we could also partner with. 2 is there's more capacity in hydro coming out of Canada. We just need to figure out a way to get it in and tap into it. And that's at 6 cents a kilowatt coming out of there versus like 20 to 25 or whatever we're at now. And so that would be a major change. 3 is more aspirational. I think there's real potential now, and I would love to test the appetite of Mainers for small modular nuclear because, and I think there's ways to do it. I was like to do it in a way that the permitting is not easy, but easier. But these reactors are low cost if you get the permitting, particularly if you get the permitting right, so it's not super expensive to build. They are safe. They've been largely proven as safe, and really one of the only ways, like, I think that you solve everyone's needs long-term for energy. I don't know if Mainers are ready for that yet. We had some problems with nuclear, big nuclear in the 80s, but small modular, I think, is a different ballgame and would be really, that could not be a day one solution for the governor because it just takes a while to build these things, but it would be something to like aim at in the longer term.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's obvious. Like, I mean, all those things that you mentioned are obvious. I wish you would have gone a little bit harder at the windmills. Although, fun fact, I had Garrett Mason
Are
on
the
last
windmills
week,
still
and
spinning, Chuck? Are they still spinning?
I don't know that they were ever really spinning, but
I mean, it's like the reason I don't bring up the windmills is it's like a 1% of the energy to generate. Right? Like it's like a
and how much of the cost is the question. All the subsidies and all the money that's been spent on those, it's like absolutely asinine. Yeah, they barely produce in the summer and obviously don't produce in the winter.
yeah, yeah.
You know, like at least the solar, though there's tons of subsidies paid on it, at least that produces some a significant, a
And
decent
I'm
amount of
not
energy
fully
in the summer.
anti-solar. I just think the way we've set it
Sure.
up with the subsidies, like in the way that like it's like our goals that we have and the way that it's impacting regular Mainers doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm sure in certain
Well,
situations, like solar makes sense. It just is not as broadly applied as we have it right now.
I'm hoping to have somebody come on the podcast to talk specifically about that. I don't want to take up too much more of your time so you can talk about the things you want to talk about. But he kind of made the remark that he thinks solar should be primarily like an individual basis, like you put it on your house. I think he thinks it makes a lot of sense. But these solar fields, there are a lot of like you know, environmental concerns actually with the solar fields and a variety of other things that make it a little bit questionable as to whether or not it's wise to do this. But at that kind of scale, especially in a state like Maine, where, you know, okay, when you're looking at the total energy grid, this is kind of his point. You know, you have to consider like that you have a certain base load that you need, and something that's intermittent is
Exactly.
unreliable. And because it's
Exactly.
unreliable, you have to have something else to back it up. And so if people want to have solar power panels on their house, like that doesn't affect the grid, right? But having the grid be partially dependent on this means you have to have a backup solar, backup energy source that you're basically effectively paying for even when you're not using,
Right.
in
Right.
order to be
Exactly.
able to
Yeah.
rely on, which increases the total cost of energy, aside from the fact that you have all this other stuff. But anyway, I like you. I like you make a really good point, because like a number of people have talked about nuclear, and I think like the reality is like, though nuclear I think is one of the solutions that we have to look for long term. I mean, we have to bring the Maine people along, and they have to want it, right? We
Well, that's the
can't,
thing, right?
like,
You're
if we
governing for the people, like, you know, like, and they've got to want it, and the public's got to want it, and you got to put forward ideas and kind of skate where the puck's going and bring them along. And if they don't come along, well, then we can't do it. And if they come along, let's go do it. But I think there's a case to be made for something like small modular nuclear, for
yeah.
sure.
But the other things that you've mentioned are things that are more actionable in the short term. So I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the way my mind works, Chuck. I'm not sure if that's what the people want, but it's like we need some short-term wins, right? Like, and
Yep.
there's some things we can do day one, short-term wins. We also need a long-term vision, right? Because like great states and great places and great anythings are not built in a year or two. It takes time. And
Right.
so like we need the
Yep.
wins to show progress, and then we need long-term investments too. And like we need to make sure that, like, I know we don't reward that in political world. Like everyone wants, like, operates in like
Yeah.
2 week or 30-day cycles, and you need to feed those cycles. But my brain also tries to solve, like, put things out there that's going to have long-term impact on generations of Mainers at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have to focus on that. So that's energy, and so you've got housing, energy.
Well, so
What's
this
next?
is under the affordability bucket, right? Like
Affordability.
opportunities. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Affordability, housing, energy. I mean, healthcare, right? Like that's a major impact for Mainers. I think that's one that we need to take a hard look at. I don't have a full plan there yet, Chuck, but I know that we've 3x the number of people on Medicaid in the state. I believe that over the last 6 years, right, since LePage left.
Yeah, we've got
And
approximately 425,000 people on Medicaid, with a similar population to New Hampshire, who has, I think, about 180,000 on their similar program.
yeah, and so like that's tough. Both on that, we'll get to my last bucket, but the state spending, but that's tough on spending for the states, right? That's also tough on rural hospitals because they get paid less for Medicaid versus if they were on commercial or other plans, and you know, I want to be careful here because I do think there's a role, like there's healthcare. People should have access to healthcare, but it should not be a program that they're on forever. It should be, I've been saying, like a trampoline, not a hammock, right? Like it's a bounce back opportunity for people. And so, I know there's plenty of people on that program that are able-bodied and could be working. And how do we create the incentives that that could help out with some of the workforce challenges? I also know that
I think heard to your point. I think I heard that there were somewhere around 80,000 childless men on there.
Yeah, exactly.
That were able-bodied.
Yeah, I was going to quote.
Geez,
I thought it was 84 or 80, but I didn't. I couldn't remember the exact number. But I think you're spot on.
It's
that, right?
It's near there, and it's like, well, I feel like we could put them to work.
Yeah, I also think, given my background coming from like this tech-enabled healthcare and like taking things and bringing them to people, like high quality care outside of a major center into their homes, and I'm also on the board of the American Telemedicine Association. So I do think there's a lot of innovative ways to reach people with healthcare and get them access to make sure that they get high quality care at a lower cost for the state and generally. And we'll want to, as I put together my plan and vision, we'll want to integrate in a lot of that activity. It doesn't solve for, like, if you need a surgery or if you have a stroke or you need to be at a hospital, right? Like, you can't do everything digitally, but there's a lot of ways to get warning signs and do early checks and to do mental health and do other things remotely and digitally. But oftentimes healthcare doesn't do them because of the payment mechanisms. And so, like, we have an opportunity at the state, if we're focusing on low cost and high quality care, to set up the right incentives to bring in new technologies to help a lot of Mainers also on that side of things.
Yeah, we definitely need to embrace technology on that level, especially with how challenging it is to get into the doctor's offices if you don't already have a doctor. I ran into that, or I had somebody I know ran into that, where they were from another country and they're green card holder, but needed to get a medication, and in order to get that medication, they had to be into a doctor's office, and it was like a 3-month wait just to be able to have your initial intake, assuming the doctor's office was accepting.
That's right. I mean, and you name a specialty, you name a type of doctor, and like similar to the trades, there's a shortage of them, and there's a shortage of them in rural communities. And so, if you hit the trifecta of housing, energy, and healthcare, you can make a big difference on people's affordability, and I think that's helpful. But then getting to the next pillar, which is jobs, opportunity, right? I call it opportunity, but it's a fancy way to say like jobs. In my launch video, I had my Uncle Thump, and he had this saying that was basically like, everything's going up by wages, right? Like, and so on the job, like, that's another one to focus on. And I laid out like a little bit of where I think we should put a strategic focus and build a set of policies in some areas like boat building, advanced forest products, and life science. Also think, the business climate piece is important there. I think that would be really helpful. I think we have a lot of small business owners in the state, and that's the backbone of the state. So encouraging more of those and finding ways to make sure, like, at a young age, people have education as entrepreneurs and business owners, I think is helpful. And then finally, people haven't talked a lot about this actually in the governor's race or generally in Maine, but everything is changing with AI right now in society, in like how things work. Right. And I look at that both as like, there's some scary things right there for people because we don't know the capabilities. We don't know who's going to have what jobs in the future. But if I look at it through the lens of Maine, every state and every place is on an equal playing field because it's a new world right now, and we're starting de novo. Yeah. And because of that, I think we have an opportunity, if we educate our people on how to use the tools and how to be there and to use their creative freedom that they have to have people that are more resilient in this economy and to build companies that maybe can do more as small businesses and compete against large businesses and to like stand out amongst the group. And we need to start leaning in here soon, early and often, or we're going to miss the wave that's coming. And so that's another one that I think we haven't decided whether or not it's key to the campaign or not, as we talked about, but I think it's key to society. So I think it should be long-term. Like we need to figure out what to do with AI on the jobs and opportunity side.
Not how to regulate it. That's not what you're thinking.
Well, I don't think so. I mean,
I'm partially kidding. I think.
Yeah, I saw the smile, and you're like, clearly you don't want more regulation, Owen.
I'm not. I don't tend to be a fan of regulation.
Yeah. I'm not. I also think that there is gonna be some state level questions to deal with, which is I'm getting into like engineer mode again. But if someone creates an AI that has an agent that talks to an agent that talks to an agent, who's liable for that, right? If something goes wrong, and that's a state level decision on like how to think about that. I don't think Maine will be a leader there. I think we should be more of a leader on workforce and innovation and keep an eye on how that plays out over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd heard, I don't know if it's true or not because I have not read the Big Beautiful Bill, and I don't have any intention to. I might ask AI to tell me. Like that.
There was a line in there. You're talking about the 10-year no state regulation on AI?
Correct. Yeah, it's still there. It's not gone through. Like the Big Beautiful Bill is still in the Senate, right?
It's still working its way through. It's interesting. You see, Marjorie Taylor Greene came out against that. Against that language. Yeah. AI's
I don't like regulation, but I also don't like regulation from the federal government telling the state governments what they can and cannot. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like this is actually like saying you can't do anything about this for 10 years is like, federal government, I'm not sure that's your decision to make for us in the state of Maine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Local control we talked about before. I don't like the state government telling municipalities.
Chuck, you just bottled up like how Mainers feel about anything. It's like as soon as someone that seems like their authority seems like they're trying to tell them what to do, it's an allergic reaction almost. Yeah. I mean, though, like, so I think there's a real opportunity there, for us in Maine. And so like, I think rebuilding the opportunity pipeline, job pipeline, is really important and it like needs to happen alongside affordability at the same time.
Well, definitely. And I think affordability, I like how going from affordability to opportunity, because if you can address affordability, you can get companies to bring, because like I think cost of energy is one of the biggest, one of the most, I mean, it's hard to state the significance of the cost of energy because that affects everything right in the state. And it discourages investment from outside the state. And if we can address that, bring in some that will help naturally to create more opportunity for better jobs.
In the red tape, like I was talking with an environmental engineering firm, and they said, hopefully I didn't use this example. I've talked about this example 3 times today, so hopefully I didn't use this already on the podcast. But and they were saying, Owen, if I need to get a DEP permit for if an industrial manufacturer calls me and says, "Hey, firm, how long does it take me to get a permit to build a new manufacturing plant in XYZ township or whatever?" And they're like, my answer to that question is, I have no idea. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean you have no idea? And they said, well, there's a maximum guarantee of time the DEP has to respond to this. But oftentimes they ask for an extension on the maximum after that. And, if you don't give the extension, you got to give them the extension. It's like almost like not an option, right? They ask for an extension, you give them the extension. And then it's an unknown amount of time to build from there. And so he's like, I have to tell people like, I don't know how long it's going to take a permit. And then if you're like, if you're Chuck Ellis, the banker, right? And you're looking at like a set of projections for someone that wants to build a new like seaweed processor or something, and you're like, okay, tell me how long this permit's going to take. You have it built in here as 18 months. And you're like, well, I think it's 18. It could be 24. It could be 12, right? It's going to be really hard to get the money to fund the deal to do that unless we get more certain, get people more certainty on timelines and make it easier to do it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the biggest things. Like when you talk about uncertainty is one of the worst things for an economy, right? In general, yes. And that's what this is. This is exactly what you're talking about here. It's like when you look at a lot of times when you see the stock market going down, it's usually outside of an economic incident. So I spent a lot of time in banking, and so the stock market's a big thing I paid attention to. But just as an aside, so a lot of times the market is receding when there's something big happening. So one of the fun things to note, and this is not giving stock advice, just for the record, is a lot of times leading up to an election, especially a presidential election, you'll see the stock market start to go down because it doesn't know. It's uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. And so because of uncertainty, people are not investing. They may be pulling some investments out, but they're not investing new dollars. The more uncertainty, the less people want to invest. This is something, again, we see this play out in the stock market. It's also why after the president's elected, generally speaking, regardless of which president, which direction it is, the stock market goes up because now people know which way the wind is going to blow, and now they're going to invest. Now certainty has reasserted itself. And so a lack of certainty causes people with money and wanting to invest to not want to invest. And so in this situation, when it's one state where it's like, we don't know how long it's going to take, they're like, what other states could I do this in?
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Exactly.
It's not that they're not going to invest. They're just not going to invest in Maine.
And we have no idea how to quantify that impact. But I've heard enough anecdotes about people that have had this conversation or similar ones that it's big, right? There's a lot of opportunity we've lost because of the unknown and things like energy costs. But for sure, like it's huge.
Yeah.
On the optimistic side, I was talking with someone that's invested in a company that does autonomous like naval ships, and they were saying, Owen, if you were governor and you could show me that there's talent or a pipeline to talent, you can give me a timeline for permitting a new site, and you could be credible about it. You could make sure that we're near an airport within an hour drive, like PWM's fine. We would take our research facility and we'd build a manufacturing plant up the coast of Maine because it's protected from hurricanes, right? Like it's a place that's the longest coastline in the U.S. except for Alaska, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to try different things there. It's a place where you have a history of it. You have a strong federal delegation, or at least Susan Collins has been strong, right? Like, and we would love it. You just need to tell me that I'm not going to get halfway through the projects. It's going to get killed and you can tell me a timeline it's going to happen. And so, I think there's some wins to be had out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we just need competent people who want to encourage business. I made up some bumper stickers. So if anybody's paying attention and wants to check out muddywaters.us, we have some products, some branded stuff to support the podcast, but we also, I created or a friend of mine created a logo, we can call it a logo. It's GOP for me. And then I was like, I need to turn this into a bumper sticker. And so I created five issues that we need to be better at. And one is, protect girls' sports and spaces, protect, reopen Maine for business, reduce crime, a couple other things. But so if you guys want that, and there's a bumper sticker on the website, but yeah, I think that the specifically reopen Maine for business, I think if we have any inkling of a desire to help increase the business, here in Maine, and I think that there used to be, coming into Maine, there used to be a Maine is open for business sign. And I think when Mills got elected, she took it down. And so anyway, we definitely need to.
But though the challenge to solve, Chuck, too, and we're not going to solve this, but it'll be a start by winning and doing it, is businesses also want to see that it's not going to seesaw, right? Like if they're going to come in and make the investment, right? Like it's a good long-term place, right? And so we also need to showcase that, by winning the House and the Senate, we need to showcase by the way we set it up. We need to talk about, the why it's happening. to make it more long-term, because,
Yep.
it also needs to be something that's going to stick. And I believe Mainers, if you get outside of the echo chambers, like of Portland, like basically most Mainers want this to happen. They want opportunities and jobs, and they want environments where we can build things and do things. And we just need to go and fight to make it happen.
Yeah, I think we need to win the information war. We need to win more people over, I think, to our side. But I think the people, I think one of the things they vote on more than anything, like we talk about social issues, like one of the biggest issues that I cover on here has to do with, how transgender ideology is impacting the education system. That is going to draw some people into the fight. It's going to motivate some people, but the vast majority of people are going to be much more motivated by their wallet.
It's funny. Yeah. Sorry, Chuck. It's funny you say that. Well, first of all, just for the record, I think biological males and female sports are unfair, right? I just I think it's wild. Like, it's wild we're still talking about this, and we should just solve it, right? Like, and then two is, it's not wild that we are. It's wild that it hasn't been solved. Just to be clear. Two is the wallet. Do you know? We might have been talking about this on Saturday. Do you know the state that had the most wins, state legislator wins in the country last cycle?
Is it Michigan?
Most state legislator wins for Republicans in the country. Do you know what's Vermont?
Vermont. Oh, okay. In the legislature.
Vermont.
And when you say wins, you mean like flipped seats that were flipped?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Flip seats. And imagine, guess what the driving factor of that was?
The wallet.
Property taxes. Their property, like 2 months before the election, I think, roughly that timeline, they all they got their reassessment on their homes.
Yep.
And then they looked at the mill rates didn't change by the same amount. And the governor, Phil Scott at the time was like, hey, if you want to change in this and not be impacted this much, you got to elect me more Republicans. He's a Republican governor. You got to elect me more Republicans in this House and the Senate. And someone said, and I haven't fact checked this, so the ecosystem can do this, that half of the wins for Republicans in state legislators was in Vermont last cycle. And I need to go track that down before I say it too many times. But your point is spot on. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So if we can address like what you've already talked about, affordability, opportunity, and then what you'll, I think those are the two things that people will claim to care about taxes, and I think they do, and that's one of the aspects of affordability is the tax.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I think like they'll claim to care about wasteful spending in government, but they only really care if it impacts their wallet, right? And if they can see how it does impact their wallet, but if they can see how it impacts their wallet.
Well, to the extent that it's tied, like state spending has been tied to these increases in taxes, right? Like that's they care about that, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the point you're making, and I agree, and I think it has. I mean, our spending is I round up, but roughly $3 billion above what inflation would be if you took the last LePage budget, right? It's roughly 12. It was 9, right? So that's got to come from somewhere. Those dollars have to come from somewhere, and it's the Mainers that are there. So
Yeah. So so after I think after affordability and opportunity.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, it was spending.
Okay.
So because we cannot keep asking, regular working class Mainers to foot the bill for every project that we want in the government, right? We're tapped out. We're the fourth highest tax state in the country. Our property taxes are some of the highest. And the tough thing is we keep, as we keep increasing the taxes, you're going to see people leave, but the people that can leave are likely the ones that can afford to move, right? Like there's a connected group there. And then more of the regular people out there logging or fishing or, nursing are going to be stuck with the bill. And the only way in my mind that we're going to make an impact is we gotta go in and make a heavy cut to spending in the state. And actually, people are like, I mean, actually, that part of the job is not going to be glamorous, right? Because it's always hard to take things away that need to be. But I'm committed to go do that and build a team to do that. And I think we're in a moment with technology that we can deliver better. We talked about this before, a little better services at lower costs. I think we need to take a look at, some of the bigger budget items out there and make sure that we are getting the best bang for the buck. I think there's a lot to be done, but if we don't curb spending, then it's going to become less and less affordable to live here. So we have to do it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, working in banking, I helped a lot of people with their finances, right? And when they don't have enough money, first we want to analyze how they're spending the money that they do have, right? Before you go and say, hey, you better go out there and get another job or get a better job or get a promotion. Sometimes that's the answer, right? You got to figure that out because you got to make enough money to live. Usually, though, there's a lot. Like I say, usually, I don't know that I've ever looked at a budget that didn't have fat to trim.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know exactly where in my budget, my personal budget, I know exactly where it should be trimmed, and it's likely takeout.
Yeah, absolutely. Takeout is one of the easiest ones to spend way too much money on.
Too many Richie's ribeyes over there in Westbrook, Chuck. Or whatever. They got the best Philly cheesesteak around. So
not bad. Yeah, that's a great spot. The burger place I like. What's it called? Blaze's Burgers.
Okay, I've not tried Blaze.
I'm more into. Yeah, Blaze's Burgers. It's.
I'm trying to cut back.
So cut back on. But anyway, the point is obviously there's places to cut, but people are afraid of that because they're worried that means you're going to cut jobs, and so I think that's one of the biggest setbacks on the Democrat side. They're always trying to. It's so interesting because you talk about cuts, and I think of like how a lot of the people who are Democrat supporters are like freaking out about Doge cuts and about people losing their jobs. And my thought is immediately like, well, if your job is unnecessary, like, yeah, I mean, granted, I think people need to have jobs, but I don't think the government should pay you to do a job that doesn't need to be done simply because you need a job. But that's what we hear a lot of. Or, I was running for office in 2024 and I sent out a text message campaign and somebody responded and we had a little bit of a back and forth. And one of the comments, like they basically said that they effectively have some sort of a weird ideology where they think that the government, every dime that they spent is well spent. And I was like, well, that's where you and I disagree. Like, I think that there's definitely waste in Augusta, but and we need to cut that. Do you have any ideas as to specifics of where?
Well, I mean, you gotta look at kind of top down on the biggest budget items. I hesitate to come up with solutions because I don't have the plan for Medicaid and healthcare, but that's the largest part of the budget. And so, you got to look there. You have to look at all the new programs that have been put into place with COVID, like that got put into place under ARPA funding, in my opinion, that weren't necessary before, but there's a lot of one-time money that funded ongoing positions that then we now need to keep. I think that there's opportunity in things where, we're delivering consumer type services directly to the population of Maine, but probably doing it inefficiently. Where we could take a product approach, like you would build and a technology approach to imagine, is there a more streamlined iPhone-esque way to build some of these things? And I think we're in a moment in technology that you don't need rock star software engineers to build great software anymore. And so I think that's going to change a lot of things, and there's some savings there. And so I think those buckets are the ones I would look at first. We also need to look at education. It's healthcare and education are the two biggest buckets, right? Total. I hesitate to propose a solution live because I'm going to launch like a plan for each of those that's well thought out and connected because they're just complex. But those are areas I'd look under.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And education definitely is another one that makes sense. And I think it's important to note that when I hear you saying cutting costs in education, I don't hear you didn't say any specifics, but I'm going to make some assumptions for you, and you can clarify if I'm wrong. That we're not talking about necessarily like cutting teachers' salaries.
No, exactly. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like a couple of things. One is we first and foremost need a strategy to make sure our math and reading scores get better, right? Like that's the fundamentals of and I think we actually have some really good teachers out there. We just have a priorities issue. Like in anything you're running and managing, like if you focus on too many things, like we've added too many things we start to care about in schools and talk about, and there's a lot of social discussions. Math and reading needs to be a focus, and the teachers need to be at the table to help solve that. And so we're not talking about that. We're talking more about extra things where there's some opportunity. There's some opportunity in administration, I think, that's out there. There's opportunity, in how we think about infrastructure, right? There's a lot of brick and mortar costs, but a lot of people learn in a lot of different ways. So, yeah, I
think every single town needs a brand new school building.
That's the thing that's the way, the tidal wave that's coming, or the storm that's coming, is the fact that they do, but with the towns having shrunk and the smaller school sizes, we're going to have to, it's going to force us to rethink it, how we do it, education in the long term. So, but yeah, those are some of, I would, it's interesting. Everyone talks about this graph. I think maybe Georgetown had published it initially, and the Maine Wire picked it up, which was here's Maine state spending, here's test scores in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that screams a strategy problem, right? Like it's like more dollars in, get worse results means we're doing the wrong stuff, right?
Right. Money is not the problem. It's priorities, as you kind of had mentioned.
It's priorities. Right? It's where we're putting the money, right?
Yeah.
And in resource constrained environments, sometimes you need to double down in some areas, whether that be literacy coaches or whatever we need, and sometimes we need to cut back in some areas, right? Like and that becomes priority, and where spending is, and all these things. And so, I mean, that's how I would run my company or other companies, or how we think about it. And so I know the state is more than just a business, but there's some principles that layer on really well.
Yeah. I mean, you're focused on outcomes, and I think you can care about kids and care about teachers, good teachers, and still say we need to reduce funding. It's one of the myths about the Republican Party is that like we don't care about education. No, we actually do care about education. Our reason for not wanting to waste money is not meaning that education is a waste, but that money is being wasted in education. And as you've noted, we went from being in the top 5 anyway, we'll say.
I think we were 4th when I went through the school, 4th in the country. The Maine was when I was going through the schools. Yeah.
To being like in the bottom 30s, some people say closer to 50, depending on which rating you're looking at. So, and we're spending 9th most, I think, last I checked, per student in the nation, and we're below 40, and so like we're completely flipped from what you would think. And one of the interesting things, and this is why I brought this up about teachers, is like if you look at how our teachers are paid. They're ranked somewhere in the low 30s in terms of the 50 states. So they're like 36th highest, 36th highest, so 14th lowest, essentially 15th in the country. And and our students are performing at about the same level that we're paying our teachers. So maybe there is that problem, and maybe we're not paying our teachers enough. We're paying administration too much, and we need to rethink how we distribute the funds. Yeah.
Well, let me even double down that. Right, like. Education for me, like the teachers I had through the public school system in Maine, like I still remember some conversations with, like they were impactful on me. The education I had in engineering school at University of Maine was transformational. And to me, done right, which is not often done right, like it is game changing for a first generation college student or others, or a first gen person, or anyone that's going out there. And so to me, we got what I know about Mainers is like we want world class education for our students, but we just want to get what we pay for, and I think that's what we're saying here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I think we've kind of walked through like your main kind of focuses, and so part of the question I have, going forward is like, like what? Wow. Geez, what sets you apart from, and maybe you've kind of talked a little bit about this, but like, again, it seems to be an ever expanding
There's going to be a lot of us. It's going to,
of gubernatorial candidates. And so what kind of sets you apart, and why are you the guy, so to speak, for us?
Well,
and then,
actually, here's my philosophy on the race. It's not profound, but I've been saying the way to win a race is to start as fast as you can and slowly increase your speed. And so like that's where my starting point. And I think the things that distinguish me, one is got deep rural roots, and I understand Mainers deeply, and that guides me, and it's built everything that I've done. And that's who I think about when I enter this race, as I enter this race. Two is, I've been an entrepreneur, and not just a business person, but an entrepreneur that has imagined something from nothing, gone and got the resources to do it, built the teams to do it, and went and done it. And I think that is like, we're going to need to imagine a different state, go paint the picture, and then say like, what's important now? And then go and do that every single day until we get there. And so I think that transcends really well. Three is, I have an engineering background, and why I say that is I look through the lens of everything. Like, there's problem and solutions, and let's clearly define the problem. And then we obviously have values we bring to the solutions, but let's go after the solutions. And like, I know that we need the message to tell the people what's important, in the political world. But to me, my main focus is like, how do we actually pragmatically solve these problems? And I think that engineering mindset helps out. And then fourth and finally, I'm an outsider to Augusta. I'm an insider to Maine, though. I've spent a lot of time across the state, and I feel that in this case, Mainers want and deserve to have something different than what we've had for the last 6 or 7 years. And I think I can bring that fresh approach and new background into the mix.
Well said. So if people want to support you, how can they get in touch or reach out?
So the nexus for the campaign is my website, which is www.owenformaine.com. You can find me there. You can find me on Facebook. Those are the two main places, but www.owenformaine.com.
Are there any events coming up that you're going to be at if people wanted to meet you in person?
This is a good setup, Chuck. There's a river cruise by the Cumberland County Republicans at the end of July that I will be on the boat out on the cruise. It's in Naples, isn't it?
In Naples.
Naples,
yes, the
Maine.
Songo River Queen is what we're going to be out on.
July 27th. Is it 27th?
31st.
July 31st. So that's an event that I have upcoming, and then others will be posted online. But that you come visit the Cumberland County Republicans on the river cruise, and love to talk to you.
So, and then there may be some other gubernatorial there are going to be some other gubernatorial candidates there. So it's a great opportunity if you want to meet some of the candidates, ask some questions, and also enjoy a beautiful evening sunset cruise, on, I think it's Long Lake, if I'm not mistaken. I should know that, in Naples, but it's in Naples. If people know, you can be upset at me, but 5:30 to 8:30, check it out on the Cumberland County Republican Committee website, ccrcme.com. Shameless plug, because I'm also the chair of the Cumberland County Republican Committee.
Yeah, I thought that was a good setup for yourself, Chuck, actually.
Yeah.
So
it was intentional. So thanks for taking the time, Owen, and thanks for being willing to run. Running for any office, I've run for House twice, is a really onerous task. One of the biggest things you have to do is ask for money, and asking for money is something that is not easy to do, especially when it's politics. There are some people, though, that do like to give to politics, but a lot of people, I had some people that were really good. I knew really well, that I tried to raise money from just when I was initially, one time I was collecting $5 contributions and I got some, we never give money to politics. I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't like it. But it's really challenging, I think, to raise money in general and to put yourself on the line and work so hard for others. And so I appreciate the selfless task of you joining the fray and really all the candidates who are working hard to try and get out there. One of the things that I really like is that I feel like we've got a number of options on the Republican side. If we can get a Republican elected, I'm happy. But I'm thankful for all the people like you and that are putting themselves out there to run and try to cast a conservative message, and hopefully we can get enough people from Maine to be tired of what the Mills administration and her cronies are doing, and the all of the I mean, on the Democrat side, it looks like we've got like Hannah Pangri, Angus King.
Yeah, you need to be like born into a family to run over there. So
or Sheila Bellows. I mean, she the one who tried to keep Trump off the ballot. Like, those are the options that we've got on the other side of the table, and it'll be more of the same. What's happening is not working. So we need a conservative out there. So thank you so much for running, and thank you for coming on. Do you have anything else that you want to say before you go?
Well, I just got Zoom bombed by my son Oliver, who's here and wants me to go take care of him and hang out with him now. So I think the podcast is officially wrapped up, according to Oliver, Chuck, and it was good to see you here.
All right. So thanks so much, and see you guys all. I'm headed off. I'll be gone for a couple of weeks visiting my wife in Kenya, and we'll be back after the 4th of July. So have a great couple of weeks, people.
All right. Bye.